right. So welcome, everybody. We are super excited to have you here with us today. Just a quick recap. We got over 200 applications for our very first Women Startup Challenge podcast, which is an extension of all of our women-led startup challenges that we have been doing across the US and in Europe. So we're super excited to do this podcast style now, and very, very excited about all of the incredible work that you all are working on with your startups. We can't wait to hear you pitch. And I just thought I'd go over some quick logistics before we turn this over to Donna, our amazing pitch coach who has been with us for all of our women's startup challenges. So just make sure that when you are doing the podcast, we are going to be calling in from Skype. If a couple of you could just unmute yourselves, mute yourselves right now so I can go through this real quickly without the audio feedback, that would be great. Thank you. So as I said, we will be using Skype and we will call you on Skype. So if you haven't provided your Skype name and your phone number, please go ahead and email that to us. Also, make sure that you have the latest version of Skype installed on your computer. And you, like I said, already will need to have a Skype account set up to do that. If you do not have a Skype account set up, please do that after you get off the call today, because the last thing that you want to be doing is installing Skype right before the podcast. You will be needing to use an external mic, which is a USB mic, and headphones. These should not be the computer's built-in mic, if at all possible. And you should also avoid using the earphones with the built-in mic unless you really, really need to as a last resort. A couple of mic recommendations if you don't have a decent external mic, and I'll send this out over email as well, is the Blue Snowball Ice, which is about $50. There's another one called Blue Yeti, and I will go ahead and send these links out to everybody as well. Also, you'll just need to remember that you should be in a place with very, very minimal background noise and the highest bandwidth internet access that you can get. So in terms, actually, before I move on from there, is there any questions on what I just said? And you can feel free to unmute yourself right now.
Just a note on that, make sure that no other devices or computers are accidentally on your network. Like if you can avoid it, because I've had that happen and all of a sudden someone else will come on and it just all of a sudden threw it off in the middle, and that would be a shame to throw your pitch in the middle because of some ridiculous technicality.
That's a really good point.
Don't go to Starbucks, don't go to the library, don't go somewhere where you know you have good internet.
That's right, your office, do it from home where there's nobody around, shut yourself in a room away from everybody. And then in terms of the format, we're going to do a 2-minute intro to each segment, and we will introduce your startup. And then you are going to have 4 minutes to pitch, and you're going to do a straight 4-minute pitch. We're not going to interrupt you with questions or anything like that. It's just a straight 4-minute pitch. As you know, it's an audio podcast, so there will be absolutely no visuals for you to rely on. And again, Donna is going to talk you through that a little bit later. And then there's going to be 4 minutes that we are going to do as a Q&A with you. So it'll be our investor and myself, I'll probably be piping in as well, and then a 1-minute closing. So that is our basic format. Any questions on that?
Yeah. Hi, Elsa. Yes, I have a question.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
No.
I obviously assume that it's going to be only audio, but
yes.
even that, do you need us to send you a pitch deck or something to add to the podcast, or it's not necessary?
Right now, it's not necessary. I encourage you to send me your pitch decks if you haven't one ready for investors, because the whole goal of this is that you are pitching an investor or two, and that we are going to spread this to the investor community. So it would be great if I did have pitch decks on hand. If someone expresses interest, hey, I heard about this startup on your podcast, I'd love to talk with them. Can I see a pitch deck? So that would be great for us. And then I'll talk with Justin. Maybe we will want to put your pitch decks up on the Women Who Tech website to go along with the podcast, if you all feel comfortable with that. So that's something you'll need to think about if you want that available publicly. You can also think about doing a one-page overview that you want to share publicly as well. So that's another option. Donna, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, that works.
Perfect. So we'll get back to you on that format, whether it's a pitch deck or one.
I have one question. What's the difference between the introduction and the pitch?
The introduction is my introduction.
I see. Great.
Of the podcast and introducing the startup.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I also ask? Yeah, on the it's kind of a weird SEC type question, but if we are, it's Abigail, by the way, from Racia. Hi.
Hey, Abigail.
Hi. Does this count as a general solicitation if we are pitching on a podcast? Have you guys had any sort of pushback or legal advice on that one? Because as you were talking about putting it out to investors, I suddenly thought, oh dear God, is this general solicitation? And do we run into any problems with the SEC on that?
I mean, all of our pitch competitions, which is the exact same format, we have never run into any sort of legal issues. We've done.
But it's a great question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And I think since you don't have slides and you're not specifically saying, come invest in me, you're saying, just throw out there in general, and we'll talk about the format. I usually don't even put an ask slide in the pitch competition. I encourage ladies to say it. Just be like, so we started our seed round and happy to talk to, we've already got 50% committed and happy to talk to you about further. So it leaves it very generic. You're not directly asking them. That should be fine.
Yeah. And like I said, we've done this at LinkedIn, Google, all sorts of spaces where it's been open to investors, to the public. We've never had any issues, and they would never put themselves in jeopardy like that either. A great question. Yeah, absolutely.
You might have already said this. I'm sorry, I was a couple of minutes late.
Oh, that's
but
okay.
who is the general audience who listens to this podcast?
So this is actually the first time we're doing this podcast. This is an extension of our Women Startup Challenges that we've done across the US and in Europe. And we decided to do this podcast because, frankly, there were so many kick-ass women-led startups that just didn't make it to the pitch competition because there were only 10 slots, just like there's only 10 slots here. So we're like, how can we begin to build this out and scale this so we can showcase and get more women-led startups funded? So that was the catalyst to doing the podcast. But for our startup challenges, it should be a very similar audience, which is going to be VCs, angel investors, the tech press, other women founders who want to support other women founders. So definitely a good mix, but it is all going to be coming from the startup world.
Great. Good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Donna, I think that we are ready to turn this over to you. So you would like for us to basically turn our camera off for this so we can get the experience for the podcast.
Well, I'm kind of deliberating, and I think it would be a cool idea. I mean, I'll introduce myself, and then we can all kind of turn off our cameras. Sorry for the noise in the background. I'm just making coffee. So there's something very effective about practicing just with voice, and I want to be able to model to you that even if you can't see me, there's a lot I can do with my voice to really kind of get up there. So in a minute, I am going to mute myself out.
Okay.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Always super exciting to be part of Women Who Tech's endeavors, and they're always thinking of amazing ways to move women forward. And I just think it's just phenomenal. The companies are always super impressive, and I can't wait to see your pitches or actually listen to your pitches next week when we actually talk. So my name is Donna. I have been doing corporate storytelling and startup pitching for nearly 15 years now. I started off working with large corporations, moved to startups when large corporations decided that they had no need for soft skills back in 2008, and that's pretty much been my focus ever since. So I write investor decks and sales decks and website content and all the crucial messaging you need to take your business to the next level, whatever level that is. So if I accidentally slip and take 5 minutes throughout this, I'm used to doing this kind of prep for 5 minute pitches, but for you it is 4 minutes. So just keep in mind that it's 4. I'll try to stick to that. Today we're going to be talking about the format of it. Now, since it's a podcast, you aren't going to have slides, but I want to preface this and say that slides are super important to have. You should be creating your pitch on a slide deck, even if it's not designed, because there's something about the way it lays out that makes sense in your brain. I was talking to an investor in LA a couple weeks ago, and he said that they were doing due diligence on a company that they were going to invest $1.5 million in, and he waited like a month and a half for them to get their deck to them with all the details that they requested, and they just didn't do it. And that was one of the reasons they passed. But he said, even if a founder comes and doesn't even open their presentation the whole time we talk, you have to have a fit and a certain flow and slides so that you can go through it in your mind. So please do slides. Here you don't have to worry about design, but think of it in slides as we're going through this, okay? So I'm going to now take myself off a video, and I'm going to share my slides. I am going to do slides here for you, so just, also to guide you through. All right. Wait a minute. Let me just put it on slideshow and then share it. Okay. Oops. Zoom and share screen, and there we go. Now we can have it. Okay, can we all see my slides? So give me a thumbs up if you can. All right, great. Okay, so we're going to focus on the quick pitch. This will actually give you some tools for your elevator pitch as well, which we'll discuss, even though it's not directly relevant for this event. I want to kind of give you that mindset so that you have that as an extra tool. I'll even talk a little bit about how you can expand the structure for your investor pitch. So what's interesting about pitching is I just gave a pitch workshop yesterday in San Francisco. I live in Mountain View. I took the train in and had a bunch of people on their way in to see a game. So if you just kind of walk down the street here and you were to ask some kind of random person what a pitch is, they'd probably answer this unless they were in a startup. But if you think about a pitch in baseball, it makes a lot of sense because you want the ball to be thrown hard. You want it to make contact with the bat, or not if you're on the other team, fly out to the audience. There's this response from the audience. Everybody's clamoring to get the ball. So there's a lot going on, and the attention is there. People aren't sitting complacently looking at their smartphones. And that's what I want your pitch to be like. I want it to be dynamic. I want it to be engaging. I want it to be suspenseful. I want people like, wow, you've reached the end of your 4 minutes. This is amazing. So oftentimes when I'm working with investors on a full-blown investor deck, I say that the first investor meeting is like a first date. And if any of you are out there still dating, I'll just give you a little bit of dating advice. If on your first date, you start talking about your entire dating history, how many kids you want to have, where you'd like to get married, there's a good chance you're not going to see that person ever again. Just saying. So here it's even more complicated because you only have 4 minutes to wow them. It's more like speed dating. I don't know if anyone's ever done speed dating. I did about 12, 13 years ago when I was living in New York. I'm like, oh, that's a very efficient way to meet people. 10 women seated on tables, men rotating through. You've got 5 minutes to talk to this person and decide whether you'd ever want to see them or speak to them again in your life. 5 minutes, 4 minutes can be a very, very long time. So we don't want that. We want excitement, we want energy. But there's no way that in 4 minutes you're going to be able to tell the whole story of your startup. And that's something that lots of founders and team members kind of falter with. We think we don't want to miss anything, so we want to just shove it all in there in 4 minutes and let them take away what they take away, but that's the wrong approach. We want to give them just enough so that they're intrigued, so that they want to hear more, but there's no way that you can shove it all in there. And also you'll be asked questions. And in those questions, and you can prepare yourself, and we'll talk about that, you can expand upon that. Now, what's funny is always there's going to be a panelist that asks something that you're like, oh, I could have put it in and I didn't. And then somebody that asks something else, you're not going to be able to please everyone. So here it's a little bit of a different format. It's just going to be the host asking you questions, but we're going to talk about what should go in there from my experience, the most important things. So let's talk about structure here. And by the way, as we go through, if you have any questions, and I'm going to stop and take questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. I see I already have 2 chats here. Beyond format, assuming the closing is done by you, not the founder. Okay, so Anastasia, did that address your question? Or do you want to expand on that? You can unmute yourself if you want to ask. Okay, great. All right, fantastic. So if anybody has any questions as we're going, I'll be looking at the chat every now and then just to make sure I get it. All right, so let's talk about format. There's a reason we call it storytelling. Stories have a very specific structure and magic to them. I have 2 little girls, almost 5 and almost 2, and they could listen to stories all day long, and they want to hear the same stories again and again and again. And I see that our brains are hardwired from the time we're born to take in stories the way they're structured. And even kids' books have a very specific structure to them, the way they're built, as do, Greek tragedy, Shakespeare, Molière, Chekhov, even the Bible. There's a very specific arc to stories. And if we kind of can nail that structure, then any message that we write becomes compelling and registers with the brain of our listeners, which is what we really want. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of obvious, but introduce yourself. You'll probably have just been introduced by Allison, and you don't need to go into too much detail, but in general, if somebody hasn't introduced you, walk up, you say your name and your company name, and then I want you to say something that I call the vision statement. So if any of you have ever watched Simon Sinek, and if you haven't, I highly suggest watching one of his talks. He talks about the why of a company. Why are they doing what they're doing? So in your 4 minutes, you're going to cover the why, the what, and the how. And we want to start with the why. It's not what are you doing. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was working with a doctor in South Africa who is working on an app that will help improve the outcome for people dealing with chronic conditions. So when I started with him and he had his deck all ready for us to work on, the opening slide said, MetaHalo is an app that provides transparent information and enabling blah, 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 like this whole, 2-line thing. And then when we worked on it a bit, it became better data, better management, better outcomes for chronic conditions. Okay, so it's simple, it's to the point, but it's also talking about not exactly how it works, what it does, but it's a hook to grab them. So really try to find that kind of higher vision statement. Now, if you have major traction, if you've closed a round, if you closed a major partnership, if you've won major awards, you might want to mention that at the beginning. This is not the time to get all modest. He, for example, it's funny, I didn't even know he was a doctor until he was halfway through his presentation. And I was like, okay, that's kind of something you need to set up at the beginning because you want to talk about your credibility. But unless your team looks like this, there's no need to start off with the team. Definitely do mention if you're a serial entrepreneur, you have a serial entrepreneur on board, a big advisor, or you're a doctor or something that adds to the credibility. There's 3 things that investors are always listening for, and that's credibility, likability, and momentum. Credibility, do you have what it takes to get this off the ground? Do you have the people? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the experience? Likability, that's on you, and we can always bring out our better sides. And momentum, how far you've come, how much proof you have. So that's how we want to start off, and that's about maybe a 20-second. Okay, I've got some messages in the chat, and I see, it's just about the recording. All right, great. And by the way, I will send a copy of the slides out so you can have those as well. If Allison and Justin will remind me at the end, that will be great. All right, so once we've covered the why, we start heading into the what. And if you think about the last great movie you've seen, action, adventure, suspense films, what makes it so great is usually, wow, we're grabbed in the first 2 minutes by something exciting that's happened on screen, and it just keeps us there. So we want our first 30, 40 seconds to be about the wow, the grabbing them. And we want to either make them feel the pain. So that would be the villain happening at the beginning, some kind of villainous act, or hallelujah, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this. This is so exciting. How has nobody done this so far? So it would be one of those products that it's like, wow, cool, great. I would download this right now if I could. So in general, people buy because they either want the carrot or the stick. They either want something good to happen to them, or they want to prevent something bad happening to them. And we just need to see what's the stronger motivation. So the last winner of the Women Who Tech Pitch competition was a 13-year-old girl. Yes. And by the way, yesterday I met a company with a 13-year-old boy CEO. Maybe we need to get the 2 of them together and they need to start a mastermind group. This is amazing to me. So she actually has created an app that helps people overcome Alzheimer's with certain, and dementia, and different types of dementia, with an app that helps them remember who people are when they call, have pictures, have things associated so as to jog their memory. So in that case, it's kind of probably going more the side of the stick. We want to make sure that we're protected, that our memories are protected, that our loved ones are protected, and good things will happen. But if it's, something that's like more of a consumer thing, more of a game, more of an experience, then it's more the carrot. This is really exciting. A parking app, hey, you'll save time on parking. So then it's more carrot. So it's choosing whatever works best and finding a story to illustrate it. The most powerful pitches start with a story. Now, it can be your own story. It could be the story of your co-founder. It could be the story of the world at large. But whatever story maybe inspired you to start this crazy journey. So for example, let's go back to my doctor friend from South Africa yesterday. He started off, pitching facts and data. And I said, tell me, Vinny, where did you start this? What inspired you to do this? And he said, well, I had a patient. That's when I realized he was a doctor. And I said, oh, you're a doctor, great. So he said, yeah, she was a 10-year-old girl and she had just been diagnosed with diabetes. And, we gave her the treatment regimen and then her family went away on holiday. And all of a sudden she slipped into a comatose state. And her parents didn't know what to do. They couldn't get me on the phone. I was in surgery. And finally, when I told them when they got me and I told them to check a few of her signs, I realized she needed to get to the hospital ASAP. The problem was she needed an authorization because she was away from her home base to even be taken to the ER. And her father spent another hour on the phone trying to get her that. And finally, it was okay. And she got there and she got the treatment she needed. But I was thinking, how many people does this happen to? How many people just don't know what to do in a situation, don't have the information at their disposal, don't understand it, And that's when I created MetaHalo. So that's a great story. And, we shaved it down a little bit to make it a little shorter, a little punchier. But take those kinds of stories of moments that why you started this journey. Now, Mark Twain said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying make up a story. I am saying that the details can be slightly augmented in order to make it that much more enthralling. So, you can add some drama to it. You can make it your story. And instead of your partner's, nobody's going to know the difference. I've collected so many stories over the years that I don't remember what's mine and what's not anymore, because stories kind of become our own. They get woven into our own narrative, and our brain, honestly, sometimes does not distinguish between actual memories and memories that we've imagined. And I think that explains pathological liars sometimes, right? So never fudge your numbers, but you can augment your story. So find a powerful story to start off with. Please don't skip this part. This is the part that grabs them emotionally. And there's an article that I wrote called Secrets from the Boardroom, what VCs talk about after you leave. And I wrote that after being privy to a very private high-level pitch session, which I'm actually going to another session of theirs it happens every 6 months, see what new things I pick up. But one of the things that they kept saying was, you need to show us that you understand your market, you understand your users, and the best way to do that, tell us about them before you begin. So even if you have a very technical, back-endy kind of technology, you want to kind of guide us through the pain of your users. So we understand their world. Even if we don't know what serverless technology is, we understand why it's causing problems. Okay, I'm going to take a pause. If there are any questions about the problem, the story, the opening, this is a good time to ask. And I'll be coaching you on this when we do our meetings next week and the following week. Anything?
Could you, I'm sorry, this is Abigail. Do you have a sense of how long that story should take?
Yeah, so if you only have 4 minutes, it's about 30 to 40 seconds.
Thanks.
Okay, it's got to be quick. You can take longer when you have longer. You should be able to tell the story in 30 seconds. Don't overtell it. Leave them wanting more. Are there questions? Okay, great. So I'll move on. If you have any, please feel free to put them up on the chat. So we've got the why, we've got the what, and now we're moving deeper into the what and actually talking about our solution. Oh, first, just these are some of the villains. These are some of the problems that you might be solving. These last three are more the carrots. The boredom, you want excitement to happen, popularizing cultural trend, missing a great opportunity. Those are the things that are not, you're not solving a problem per se, but you're bringing a great opportunity to the table. Then we want to move on to our solution, and you're going to write probably the most difficult thing you've had to write, which is your simple solution statement. One sentence describing what your startup does that would be understood by anyone, whether they have a degree in computer science, cryptography, or anything for that matter. And I want everyone to be able to understand it. So we do X for Y by Z. All right, as simple as that. And you can switch around the order of X, Y, Z, that's fine. Or another way to do it, ARSC of Founders Institute created the startup MadLib. Remember MadLibs, where we were on vacation in Palm Springs a month or so ago, and there were, as a family, playing MadLibs and kids. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that paper is still around. So you put in your name of the company is developing a defined offering to help a defined audience solve a problem with a secret sauce. Secret sauce is always a nice thing to have, showing what truly sets you apart, what's your unfair advantage. Someone that you have on your team, IP, industry knowledge that others don't have. It's always a good thing to know and to highlight. But as fast as possible, you want to get to a demo. Now, here comes the interesting part. Here we are in a podcast. How on earth do you demo your solution. Now, normally I would say get up, show screenshots, walk us through, let us see it. Wow, because we're very visual creatures. Suddenly, we don't have that when we're in a podcast. So here's my suggestion. If you've started off with a story, now guide us through how that person, place, or thing would use your app. So guide us through a story. So let's say now, let's call the 10-year-old girl, I think it was Lisa. That's the name we made up for her. Now, how would Lisa's parents use this new app? Well, first of all, they'd go on, they'd register her information and give permission to access her medical records. So we actually are HIPAA compliant and have digital health records. Another feature is that she can now communicate with her treatment team. She can actually get on a chat, her parents can ask, and they also have access to all these different resources. So here I am, I'm describing the app, but I'm doing it in a way that people can actually imagine themselves using it. Then what they would do was they would go through and do this and this, okay, and so you kind of get the drift. Walk us through a demo and make it very interactive. Now, use the fact that the host is there and kind of riff off of her and ask, you can say, so have you ever had to do this? And get her response. And then, so make it almost like a conversation. That's the benefit of not just pitching to empty air. Make it almost like a little interview and make it interactive with the demo. Now, out of your 4 minutes, I'd devote at least a minute to a demo, even though they can't see it. You really want to highlight some features through the user story and the user experience. Of course, if you were demoing this in person, I'd want to see it. I'd want them to see it. Okay? Questions about this? Because I know this is going to be a tricky part. How many minutes in are we at this point? So let's count. 20 seconds on the opening, or 10 to 20 seconds on the opening, the why. 30 seconds on your story. So let's say that's 50 seconds. Now, a minute, 10 seconds to do your simple solution statement, and then another minute for your demo. So you've used about 220 at this point, which is just fine. That's just where you should be, give or take. Don't worry, I'm only giving you enough content that you should really be able to build out this 4-minute pitch. Then you want to talk about how far along you are. What are the major KPIs, milestones that you've hit, numbers, monthly active users, growth, month over month, quarter over quarter, MRR, ARR, anything impressive that you've done so far that shows. I have a client that I worked with them on their first one-pager, and they just advertised that they hit 100 million monthly active users, which is an amazing milestone. It's a double female founder team. They're 2 women, and it's always exciting to see. And it's a very, very techy kind of, they work with SDKs. So very proud of them. But so those are very, very good performance indicators that you are doing really well. What phase is your product at? Is it beta? Is it an actual product? How many clients do you have, paying clients? Anything to indicate your momentum. Okay? And just choose like the 4 or 5 most impressive things. Again, usually I would say put the big numbers up on the screen. You don't have a screen to put it up, so don't go into too much detail. That's where we have to be very careful when we don't have slides there, because people's attention tends to drop down. Did you hear what I just did with my voice? We're going to talk about voice, but I'm trying to be very aware of the fact that you might be dropping off here, and I have no way of knowing that, and you can't see me. You can just see my slides. So I really want here and there to punch the voice to bring you back in. Then we're going to talk about the business. There are 3 main aspects of the business in your 4-minute pitch that I want you to address, and you can address them very briefly. One is differentiation. Yes, you have competition. What sets you apart? You don't have to go into detail and explaining just about the competition. You can have, just usually you would have like some kind of visual that shows up. Here you can just say, there are many players playing in this field. What sets us apart is A, B, and C. We're the first to do both AI recognition of the various treatments and personalizing it, as well as direct communication app and transparent electronic records all in one solution. Okay, so the differentiation statement, monetization, how you're going to make money off of it, even if right now you're not opening your monetization and it's free for use just to build your community. How will you make money? What are some potential business models, monetization streams, and opportunization? It's not a real word, but it rhymes with differentiation and monetization. So what's more interesting, even in the fact that you have a big market and you want to mention, of course, how big your market is, either here or maybe even in the opening you've addressed it. What are some trends that are making you a very hot opportunity right now that people should say, oh my gosh, I need to invest in this now or else I'm really going to miss the boat? So just for example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the GDPR that's about to come out, which is the regulation in the EU for data privacy. Now, I've had clients that have been working on solutions for GDPR compliance for 2 years now. And this is their golden time, of course, because, of course, major institutions and financial institutions and banks have not yet created a solution for it. And they're scrambling because here it is about to roll out next month and they could be fined megabucks. So if you have a regulation rolling out, or you have a trend, or Gartner just came out and said 2019 is the year for blah, 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 or maybe one of your competitors was just acquired, which is great because it signals that there's a real need for this and maybe one of their competitors is going to acquire you next. So whatever shows that this is a very hot opportunity note, bring it in. Tell us that story, tell us that quote. If you can read a quote, it's even better. Remember, the benefit of a podcast is you can have your notes out right in front of you, not like when you're pitching on stage. So I don't want you reading your notes, but you can refer back to them to read certain specific bits. Then you can talk about your team as a whole, as assets, not going into each person's CV. They won't be able to see pictures anyway, so you can just say, we're a team with extensive industry experience in both technology, design, business. My co-founder, Michelle, spent 10 years in Google on their in their play, blah, 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 whatever. So whatever, you're bringing to the table that really shows that you're the team to get this off the ground. And then finally, I want you to end with inspiration. And it happens all the time. This is my third pitch coaching for this week. Doesn't always happen. This is kind of the season, April, May, where there's all these competitions and all these kind of delegations coming into Silicon Valley. So as I was listening to pitches, almost nobody had an inspiring ending, and it ended off something like, well, yeah, I think that's it. Just shoot me now, please. No, you've given us a great story. End big and inspiring. So if you started off with a story, cap it off here. So, let's say Lisa, the 10-year-old girl, we want to cap it off. So Lisa today is using our product. She's now got her diabetes under control. We haven't had any more episodes. Her parents confer with the team, and she's just leading a normal 10-and-a-half-year-old life. She's really happy with it, and so are we, and we're happy that we can help all the Lisas out there. But diabetes is just the beginning. We'll be able to address issues of other like HIV management, psychiatric management, cardiovascular disease, anything that anyone has complexities with keeping it under control. And that we want to be able to address these markets, improve the outcomes, lower the costs, and give people a better quality of life. So, okay, there you go. There's an inspiring ending, and it took 20 seconds. You can end with a quote. You can end with, well, we can't do an image here, but something that just ties it all together. Take them on a journey of that next big step that you're going to take of, bigger market, additional markets, additional products that they can say, wow, this is exciting. I can't wait to see where this person goes. So that is the structure of your 4-minute pitch. Questions up until now? Okay, I'll take that as a no questions. Please feel free, of course, to write into the chat. So usually this is the part where I'd start to talk about slides and visuals. I'm not going to do that today because it's not relevant for here. If you do have any specific questions and we have some time later, then we'll go there. Let's talk just to show you how this would look for an investor pitch outline. So the good news is you can expand this and make it even longer. So what you'll see now is basically I've created 4 buckets of information for you. The problem, the solution, the business, and the moving forward. Even in 4 minutes, we've done that. And in an investor pitch outline, we have room for even more of that. So the need, the challenge, the problem, your proposed solution, your overview, your demo, the business. A lot more can go into it, of course, if you have a longer meeting, and your vision for the future. What are your milestones that you're going to hit, your roadmap, funding requirements, what your round objective is, what, where will you be at the end of the runway. And I like to end off with a slide that I call key investment merits. Right before, right after you adjourn, just reminding them why they really want to invest in you, the 6 most powerful points. Then what happens if we shrink this down to an elevator pitch? Same thing. So there's 3 different kinds of elevator pitches. One is the actual elevator pitch that would take you probably to the top of the Empire State Building, about a minute. Then we have the handshake pitch, which is about 20 seconds. And then we have the eye blink pitch, which is a series of quick one-liners. So when you know you have a minute to introduce yourself, and I've seen if you've watched like Planet of the Apps, which is an Apple series, people give a 1-minute pitch to a panel of 4 judges as they're coming down like an escalator. So by the time they get to the end of the escalator, they'll have finished. And you can really do that. You just really need to work on your stories there. Don't let go. Even if you only have a minute, don't let go of the part of explaining the problem in a short story. Just shorten the story. Grab people. That's such an important piece, because otherwise you run the risk of losing them, of it going right over their head. Handshake pitch, you have 20 seconds, do 1 line on the problem, 1 line on the solution. So, it could even be, do you know anyone in your life that's ever had to deal with managing a chronic situation? It could be a heart disease, it could be depression, it could be diabetes. Well, there are cases of lack of adherence, of not taking the right meds, and of not having access that is actually killing people and causing a burden of hundreds of millions of dollars each year. That's why we've created MetaHalo. And then you can give, your simple solution statement, 20 seconds and you're done. And what's good about that is you aren't boring the person. You're letting them know quickly what it is that you're doing and giving them the option of staying and hearing more or leaving. And if they're interested in hearing more, they'll say, oh, tell me more. And they'll say, sounds great. Good luck with that. And then you can just let them go on their merry way and not waste any more time on them or have them waste time on you. By the way, your elevator pitch will be different if you're speaking to a potential investor, a potential partner, a potential customer, or just someone who's curious about what it is that you're doing. So make sure that you adjust it for those audience. Try to find out who it is you're talking to before you give it, so that you can make it interesting to them, and try out all kinds of different versions of your elevator pitches. Your eye blink pitch, you already have 2 that we talked about. Your vision statement is an eye blink pitch. Your simple solution statement is an eye blink pitch. And then you can have all kinds of one-liners about the value you're really bringing to the market. Did you know that we could minimize the spend of insurers each year by $400 million with better outcomes? Oh, okay. Throw that in. Cool. I don't know what your name is, Sabitude Women. You're the only image I see, but you look like Judi Dench. Every time I glance at you, So, and I don't mean that as a compliment. I don't know what your name is, though. So, hi, Sabitude. Okay, so any questions about the elevator pitch or any of that I've covered?
Hey, Donna, this is Rachel. I have a question about the financials, if you wouldn't care. when I'm pitching, I feel like that I try to make my impact statements with my words, but then have more of the nitty gritty details that investors might be looking at on the slide. So when I'm not using a slide deck, what's the best way to kind of provide some concise financial information, like, our revenue over the next 5 years and our cost?
Don't talk about projections in a pitch like this with no slides. Let that be a question to you, because anything you don't address, assume that they're going to ask you, and we'll get to that in a moment. I would not go into any kind. First of all, I wouldn't ever voluntarily put a 5-year plan, because it's about the same as like licking your finger, putting it up to wind and saying, you know what, in 2 months it's going to rain. We have no way of really knowing that. 3 years is a bit more realistic. And again, even that is kind of like putting your finger up to the wind. So in a pitch like this, I would not go there. I would just talk about what you've achieved so far.
So don't mention the financials at all. So maybe more mention the revenue model of how we get money and how.
Exactly. I mean, I don't even want you to go in necessarily to your go-to-market here.
Okay.
Leave that for a question, unless you have a super unique go-to-market, like you've got some amazing influencer that's joined forces with you and is going to be taking this forward, or some like a great partnership that you've already implemented, and then you can mention it.
Okay.
But leave the nitty-gritty off. It's just too
much. Okay. Thank you.
But thank you for asking that. That's good. I have another thing on the chat. Camilla from Savitude. Not sure how to. No, you're fine. I don't mind at all. You can leave your face there. But I just keep seeing you, and you keep looking like this regal Judi Dench. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on. All right. So exactly to Rachel's part of Rachel's comment. I want you to know your audience's questions and answer them in advance. So how do we know your audience's questions? Well, luckily for us, people are not terribly creative. You probably get the same questions about your startup again and again and again, which is great. So I want you to write down all the questions you've ever received, all the questions you think you might receive, and all the questions you are petrified of receiving, and answer them. Write out answers. And I see people usually really, really practicing the pitch, but kind of forgetting to practice Q&A. So just the same way you'd be reviewing your pitch before a session, a competition, a podcast, review the answers to your questions. And again, you'll have them in front of you, so kind of you can have that document open and just have it there, but also just familiarize yourself with how you'd want to answer. If they ask you a question you don't have an answer for, say, you know what, great question, I don't have all the data, can I get back to you with that? That's legit. If they ask you a question that's sensitive, you can say, I'm not at liberty to discuss this, happy to take it offline, but you can't use that line too many times. Otherwise, it sounds like you just don't know the answer and you're kind of hiding it. All right, so be prepared for the questions. Anything that would go in your investor deck that's not in your 4-minute pitch, they probably will ask you about. Okay? Keep your energy up. Be memorable. Now, when you're on stage, you have your voice, your eye contact, your hand gestures, your movements. You have so many different ways to pull them in. When you're on a podcast, it's only your voice and your presence. But I would suggest, don't just sit down while you're doing it. You know, you can stand up. I'm sitting here gesturing away and making faces and doing all kinds of things, because I truly believe you can hear that energy through the voice. And I used to do trainings for webinars or phone meetings. And we'd also kind of, everybody would go to the other room and call into the bridge, and we'd practice doing it that way. So it's amazing how much energy you could do with your voice. All right, we have a question here in the chat. +1 to standing up while speaking and smile, it comes through. Yeah, it definitely does. You can hear smile. I've done voiceovers for many years, and it's funny how when you smile, now I'm really smiling, a big smile, you can really hear it in the voice. So definitely stick with that. Speaking of voice, let's talk about voice. Opera singers do not need microphones because they spend their life honing their inner sound system. and they could probably sing out to an entire concert hall and not need a microphone. We have that same capacity, but we don't access it as much. And it's our breath. It's our diaphragm. So even if you're on a podcast and not, with a mic, I want your voice to be heard. Yesterday, I had somebody presenting, and they were a really great presenter, but then at the end of the sentence, they were kind of fading off. I call that frying, like frying their voice. So you run out of air and you keep talking even though you're out of air, and then you're afraid to take a breath because then you're going to lose them, and then we start not hearing the end of your sentences and that kind of it. All right, so take a breath. Breathe in through your nose. Fill your belly with air. It's like a yoga breath. So then you have a whole tank of air to support your breath, and you can keep talking until you start to feel that your breath is about to dissipate. You take a pause and you take another breath. And that little pause is a nice moment to bring people back in and to help them gather their thoughts as well. So that's volume and breathing as one. Another thing is clarity. Now, any of you that English is not your first language and you're presenting in English, there's a disadvantage because our mouths are used to speaking a certain language. And then we learn another language, but the muscles of our mouth are still used to making the sounds from another one. So yesterday I was working with a group of French entrepreneurs, and they have two main language issues. One is they can't say TH. So they say sie, said, sie, elle. And the other thing is they add an H in where it doesn't go, like Huber instead of Uber, or they take an H away from where it doesn't go, like instead of half, they'll say half. So those are two things. Like, I want you to be aware of your clarity. I'm not saying get rid of your accent. Your accent is amazing. It's part of who you are. And Americans are suckers for accents, honestly. But I want them to understand you and there not to be lack of clarity in your speech. So practice that if you're not a native English speaker with someone who is, so that they can point out to you certain words that might not be clear, and you can ask my advice on how to make them clear. Take your time. I know it's only 4 minutes, but you can't sacrifice time for speed, because if you talk too fast and you don't take the pauses, they're not going to get you. I'd rather you take out some of the content and take your time. And another very important thing is musicality. I usually pose the question in a workshop, who has never read a book to a child? And all these geeky developers with kids, usually guys, will raise their hand, and I give them homework. Go borrow a child, preferably from someone that you know, and spend an hour trying to read books to them. Because kids are very candid with their feedback. They will tell you if you're boring and if you suck, and they will also give you guidance onto how to sound better. Oh, no, I do the voices. You can't just read a book. Once upon a time, there was a horse that lived on a hill. So use that musicality, and two types of words that you can really punch in your sentences. One, numbers. 50,000 downloads a day. Boom, the number kind of jumps out. Wow. Another thing is adjectives. Everybody was amazed by the stunning interface of their app. So stunning kind of bleeps out. So adjectives and numbers can kind of be popped. And if you want to remember to do that, you can, as you write out your script, and I would suggest that you write out a script, but don't memorize it, just familiarize yourself with it. You can make those words in bold or in a different color so you remember to pop them as you practice. And again, please don't forget to breathe. Let's see. Are these podcasts going to be edited? Bit of editing, not much, just in sense. Okay. So yes, you want it good, and think of it as a one take. Think of it as you would on stage. All right. This is your moment to shine. Okay, moving on. Well, filler words. Guess what? When you're on a podcast, it's even more pronounced. These are usually words that we don't realize that we're even using. It's like biting your nails. You don't realize it until somebody mentions that you're doing it. So we need to make ourselves aware of it. And it's not just what was the word I was looking for? It's somebody that every other word is or basically. The other day I had people that were every other word was basically. And it just kind of clutters your speech. So if you or your partner, co-founder tends to do that, there's a very simple fix. The person that does emming will present, and you tell them every time you say or like or well or whatever the word is, I'm going to clap. And by clap, I do not mean slap, smack, electrocute, or harm in any way. I just mean clap. And all you need to do when you hear the clap is just take a moment, realize that you said it, take a breath, and go on. So the first time they hear the clap, they're going to be like, what? I didn't say it. What are you talking about? Why are you making that up? And it's going to totally throw them off, and they're going to get a bit frustrated, and that's okay, because we're reprogramming our brains a little bit. The second time, they're going to be like, oh, I did say, didn't I? And then the third time, they're going to catch it along with you, and then it's just going to disappear. And then all of a sudden, you're going to start noticing how many people, and it's going to be like, I can't unhear this now. It's one of those things. So let's curb the ums and the ms. Let's talk about practice. Practice truly does make perfect. I want to be able to wake you up in the middle of the night and say, okay, pitch, and you're ready to go. So I want you to practice in front of your team members, practice in front of your family members, practice in front of your neighbors. You know, heck, if you're in a train, a plane, they don't have anything better to do for a few hours, ask if you could pitch them. Because you never know who you're going to be meeting and who's going to be on the other side of something and who you need to be ready to pitch. I've had cases of people that get into a Lyft line or an Uber pool and end up sitting next to their next major client or an investor or who knows. So really practice till it's very solid. And I say don't memorize, because if you memorize and then you forget one word, it can completely throw you off. Just familiarize. Even though you're going to have the script there, I don't want you reading off your script. You can make bullets so that you kind of can jog your memory and you're not running the risk of just sitting there reading it. And that is basically, well, all I've got for you for today. Thank you. So I will say this, Stuart Butterfield of Slack said that if there was one piece of advice he could give his younger self, it would be tell a powerful story. Everything else will fall into place. So I really want your stories to resonate. I really want your energy to resonate. And I really want you to shine through this podcast so that they feel your amazing energy. So thank you very much. And I will be happy to take any questions now, and I can come back on.
Thank you, Donna. That was awesome.
Was it different not seeing me and just hearing the voice? I'm curious.
I mean, you definitely, you know, when you pitch, you definitely have a very animated vibe, but it definitely came through just with your voice. So I thought this was a really cool way to do it, especially since we're doing a podcast style, is that it shows that you can still be animated and emphasize words and punctuation and points through voice. And I think that really came through.
Good. Good. Okay, questions, ladies. You can unmute yourself if there's anything you want to ask now to me, to Allison and Justin. This is the time for it.
Can I just ask, do you guys know, by the way, thank you for that. That was phenomenal. Do you know generally, because normally when you're pitching, you kind of know who the audience is and what their criteria are. Do we have any sense of the kinds of questions that are going to interest the judges, the other hosts on the podcast? You know, is this, what's their focus? What are they looking for?
I mean, they're looking for exactly what Donna just shared with you. They're looking for this type of pitch.
Right. I'm more thinking about like in the question things. Are they, you know, very heavy into the financials?
It really depends on each investor. And honestly, the questions for each of for the startups are going to be different based on your content. So we don't come at them with a certain script, like here's what you should be asking. We've never seen the investors through all of our startup challenges ask each of the startups the same exact questions. I mean, I will say that, you know, they are going to be looking for holes, holes in your story, holes in your product. Like, are you not growing? Are you not seeing any traction? If so, why not? What are you doing differently now to address some of these pain points, some of these challenges? So while they're obviously here to support you, they're also going to, you know, they're probably going to be challenging you a little bit on some of the things that you're going to be talking about, and why you have to be able to convince them that this is the most kick-ass product that an investor should be funding. So they're going to, you know, ask you probing questions like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is Justin. So not only will you get those probing questions, but also sometimes if your pitch isn't entirely clear, they will ask clarifying questions. So the clearer your pitch is, you'll have room for a variety of other questions instead.
Thank you.
Anything else?
One other thing I just wanted to raise, I think in response to that, Abigail, was also, Justin brought up a really good point, is the more unclear your product is, they will hone in on, I just don't get what you do. Can you explain that? Oh, can you explain that better? Don't get frustrated because you understand your product and it's crystal clear to you. That frustration, especially in a podcast, will come through even more in your tone. So just try, and I know it's hard, but just try and just like be calm. And I also like to pretend that I'm explaining my product to a 5-year-old who doesn't, you know, have any sense of what we're doing. And if I can break it down as something as simple to explaining it to a 5-year-old, then an investor who is not even in your market will be able to understand it.
And I think that's super important what Allison just said. And one of the groups I was working with this week, and I gave like notes on, you can't start a vision statement of serverless technology. We do performance monitoring for serverless technology. Okay, what does that mean? What are you doing? And somebody said, well, why, what, if an investor gets to get it, if not, we don't need them as an investor. And that's a very kind of arrogant attitude. I don't like that. And I've seen it come through. There's a lot of new technologies. There's a lot of new arenas. You might be doing something new, and it's your onus, your responsibility to explain it in a simple way so that the investor will get it. Because I've seen investors stop and say, can you explain that in layman terms? So it's not about, you know, we're doing performance monitoring for serverless. So serverless is now something that a lot of companies are doing in order to save on bandwidth, save on data. The problem with it is that the data kind of gets scrambled all over the place, and there's no order to queries. We help performance monitoring so we can help companies make the most of their serverless experience. So something simple like that, just explain it, give a little bit of background.
Yeah, and
I also just want to say one more thing, sorry, Justin, is that even if the investor that you're pitching to on our podcast, or even when you just meet an investor at events or you're pitching to them, even if they are not the right fit for your product, they know 30 other investors, 50 other investors that could be the right fit for your product. So we talk to investors all of the time. They're like, you know, that's not really our area, but what I'm really interested in is focusing on building and water technology. And I'm like, great. Well, we have some recommendations for startups that work on that too. So in thinking about how you're pitching, is you may not be pitching to the person who is really focused on your niche, but you gave such a pitch and it was so crystal clear and they were really excited about what you do, they're going to introduce you to 3 other investors that they think would be interested.
Definitely. And a really key way to actually keeping that calm that Allison is referring to, not only during your pitch, but also during the Q&A, is remembering to breathe. So as Donna said, just breathing throughout, because forgetting to breathe takes up a lot of energy, and it'll really give a sense of calmness overall.
One other quick question about the demo piece. So is a good way to do that when we're just explaining it verbally to share the features of the site in sort of a list? Because the demo to me, it's so much better if you can see it, but I want to still communicate it well.
Donna, did you want to take that one? Donna, you need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry, Rachel, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure, yeah. I was just asking for the demo portion of it because that's so much better when you can see it visually. Is a good way to explain it to more just list the features of the site?
No, I don't just rattle off the features. Like I said, tell it as a story, as a user story. So give us, the whole arc of how they would do it. So first they would sign in and do it like this, and then so I like the features through their user experience because then it makes the person imagine themselves doing it. And if I can imagine myself doing it, I'm actually almost like watching a demo in my head. Okay?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions, Camilla? Anything from you? Oh, Camilla, we can't hear you.
Well, of course, I have lots to give, but right now I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, great.
You've done a really good job explaining. The only thing that's not clear is dividing up all the time, but I think the outline was really clear, and I think it's up to us to divide the time up.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the this webinar along with the pitch deck. There is some timing reference, but I also think, you all are going to have to play with it in terms of timing. What worked for one may not work for another. And then when we do the practice pitch in the next week and 2 weeks, we will hear your pitch and we will tell you, you know what, that section was too long, shave off 20 seconds, extend here. So, Donna definitely provides some really great guidelines, but you're going to have to really kind of feel your way with the timing on, based really on your product. And then when we get together again, we will give you some guidance on where to trim, where to expand, if something wasn't clear, and then you'll have an opportunity to go back and address that before the podcast.
Thank you. I just also want to say it's so exciting to finally actually meet you, Allison and Donna, after all this time.
Oh, so great to meet you.
Yeah, it's always fun to put faces to the names. So just another note on that, I think it's going to be interesting for me. I think this will probably be the first time I'm doing pitch coaching without seeing slides.
That's right. It's all going to be on voice.
So this is going to be an opportunity to see how well you can really hold our attention span, because we're there meant to be listening to you, and yet as human beings our brains wander. So you're going to have to work really hard. I'd say your voice, your intention has to go up at least 25 to 50% more than it would be in a normal day-to-day conversation, or if you had slides there, because you have to carry the weight of this.
Donna, one question for you as we're talking about that, and we did talk with our podcast producer, and since this is the first time that we're doing this, I did ask him if he thought that we should be breaking up the 4-minute segment and treating it more as like, the investor asked some probing questions, but then I think he thought that would get really repetitive over 10 pitches. So
yeah,
I'm curious,
I'm torn. I'm having that conversation inside my head as you're saying that, and I'm kind of like, oh, do I? Don't I? I don't know what to say, because it also time can get away with us like that.
Right.
So I would say, you know what? Let's listen in our practice sessions.
Okay.
And maybe there would be a few that would just totally lend themselves to a conversation. Okay. And maybe we just want to keep it as like a go through, because I'm afraid of it, kind of throwing them off track.
Right. So let's see how it goes in our practice pitches. And if we all decide collectively, you know what, we'd like a couple of break points where me or the investor asks some probing questions just to make it flow better, we can easily adjust.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm sorry, I missed the early part, so you may have already said this. How is the podcast itself going to be structured? Or is it one company per podcast, or are they?
Yep, it's one company per podcast in terms of the release. We'll be recording 5 in one session, but we will call you when it's your turn, and we'll nail down the specific timing on that as we get closer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And when will the winner be announced? Like, when will all of the pitches have happened?
Yep. Yeah, so the winner will be announced at the beginning of August. So we're going through the recordings first, and then we release one per week. Following that, then there's a public voting session where everybody will get to come in and vote for their favorite podcast. And then it'll be, the final decision will be, I believe, 30% public vote, 30% the Women Who Tech staff, and then 40% the investors. It'll be fun.
How many investors are going to be?
We have one investor for each podcast. And the reason that we do that is because if it gets to be too many voices on the podcast, it's really hard to distinguish who is who.
And it's not the same investor for every podcast.
We're dividing it up. We have one investor for the first 5 and another investor for the second 5, but they will be hearing all of the pitches together, and that's how they will determine their favorite winner.
Hey guys, sorry, I've got to actually go to an investor meeting right now. So
Okay, well, good luck.
Good luck.
But I will.
You're going to crush it.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to the next session, and I will see you guys later.
Okay, take care. Bye.
One thing I would suggest is listen to some podcasts. Mixergy is a good one. How I Built This, and listen to how the founders are talking, who appeals to you, who doesn't, who sounds good, and start kind of honing your style. And that's probably a good thing to do as well.
Agreed.
Do I have to practice not cursing?
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe it'll give you, like, a little bit of an edge.
I pitch toys, mother. No.
Okay. Yes. That's funny.
Do you have a recommended source of where we could listen to 4-minute female pitches or other pitches?
Are there recordings of the last few competitions?
Yes, we have recordings of the last few startup challenges. Mm-hmm. So I will send you a couple of examples. Obviously, they're not audio podcast, but you'll be able to definitely get a sense of the flow of their pitch. Stephanie from Blendor, from our LinkedIn Startup Challenge, is definitely still one of my favorite pitches. She just has so much energy. She gave an amazing pitch. Donna, you were there for that, for Blendor. Yeah. Yes. So
she's just amazing, period. She
is amazing, period, but it also comes out in her pitch. So we'll send you a couple of examples that you definitely can take a look at.
We going to have another one on the West Coast anytime?
Yeah, we have to get back out to the West Coast. We're going to Europe next, and then we'll come back to the US.
Right. It's like wherever you all went on vacation. Right?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
But we do also then go on vacation after, so it is kind of nice.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And any questions that you have for us along the way, you know how to reach Justin and I over email. We're very responsive. And if you have questions for Donna, let us know that too. And yeah, this is going to be really fun. We're super excited.
It was so great to meet everybody today. Congratulations again on making it as a finalist in the first season of the podcast.
Can't wait to hear the pitches next week.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Have a great one. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.